This moment often shows up around certain people. Someone makes a comment that crosses a line, not loudly or cruelly, but just enough to register. You can see the person heard it, but they still stay quiet. No reaction, no correction. The conversation simply moves on. A few hours later, someone makes a casual, reasonable-sounding request, and the same person agrees to it without any tension in the exchange. In fact, there's nothing new about it. But only if these things happened once or twice in a blue moon. What likely started as a familiar joke or a small, informal request slowly turns into something heavier. The comments stretch further, the expectations grow. Consideration starts getting bypassed, even though nothing ever looks confrontational. From the outside, it doesn't look like pressure. Instead, it looks like flexibility, calm, someone who's easy to deal with. And when there's no visible resistance, some people read that as permission. So the behavior continues, adjusts, and settles in. By the time this dynamic gets questioned or pushed back on, it doesn't feel new to anyone else. Instead, it just feels unexpected. This pattern is rarely accidental. Calmness like this is usually learned, often early in environments where reacting made things worse, where emotion escalated conflict instead of resolving it. Over time, the nervous system learns that stillness keeps situations manageable. Silence reduces fallout. Composure becomes a form of self-protection. Eventually, that restraint stops feeling like a strategy and starts feeling like who you are. The problem is that adult social dynamics don't reward invisible discipline. They respond to clarity. Calm people often assume their internal limits are obvious. They aren't. People can't adjust to boundaries they can't detect. So they keep leaning. They take more time, more energy, more emotional access. Not necessarily out of malice, but because nothing in the interaction signals resistance. This is why calm people are often described as easygoing or low maintenance. The labels sound positive, but they reshape expectations. They teach others that you'll adapt, that you won't make things uncomfortable. Over time, being easy to be around turns into being easy to overlook. Your presence becomes reliable infrastructure instead of a person with limits. There's another layer that complicates this. People feel safer unloading their chaos around someone who doesn't react strongly. Calm people become emotional stabilizers. Others vent, spiral, and process out loud, assuming it's fine because there's no visible strain. What they don't see is the accumulation. The internal tracking of moments where you absorb discomfort to keep things smooth. Eventually, something shifts. Not explosively. Calm people rarely erupt. They withdraw, they disengage, they reduce access quietly. And when they finally leave, emotionally or physically, others are shocked. From the outside, nothing ever looked wrong. That's the cost of being composed without being clear. Being taken for granted doesn't announce itself clearly. It shows up as repetition. The same adjustments, the same assumptions. Different people, similar outcomes. And because nothing ever looks urgent in the moment, the pattern has room to continue. What often gets missed is that calm people are not endlessly tolerant. They're selective. They let things pass because they're assessing whether something matters enough to engage. The issue is that this internal filtering process is invisible. Others don't see the evaluation. They only see that nothing happened. Over time, that absence of response gets interpreted as agreement, acceptance, or emotional availability that doesn't need to be reciprocated. This is why calm people are rarely protected in group dynamics. Protection usually follows visible distress. The person who reacts strongly signals urgency. The calm person signals manageability. So attention flows toward whoever appears to need it most. Calm becomes synonymous with they'll be fine, even when they're not, especially when they're not. In work environments, this shows up as extra responsibility quietly landing on the same shoulders. In friendships, it looks like always being the listener, but rarely being checked on. In relationships, it can turn into partners assuming access without negotiation. None of this feels dramatic enough to confront in isolation. The damage comes from accumulation, not from any single moment. Calm people also tend to delay correction. They wait for patterns to confirm themselves before speaking. They don't react to one misstep. They notice the second, the third, the fourth. By the time they decide something needs to be addressed, the other person has already normalized the behavior. From their perspective, this is how things have always been. That gap in perception is where most breakdowns happen. When a calm person finally draws a line, it feels sudden to everyone else. The response is often confusion rather than accountability. Why didn't you say something earlier? But the truth is, you were saying something, just not in a language that demanded attention. There's a quiet grief that comes with this pattern. It's the realization that being composed made you convenient, not considered. That your effort to keep things stable trained people to rely on your silence instead of your consent. Calm people don't want control. They want mutual awareness. When that doesn't happen, withdrawal becomes the only remaining form of self-respect. The solution isn't to become reactive or loud. It's to make calm visible, to add clarity where there used to be assumption. Calm with boundaries is different from calm without them. One communicates choice, the other invites projection. You don't have to perform emotion to be taken seriously, but you do have to translate your limits into something others can register. This often feels uncomfortable at first, especially for people who learned early that expression disrupted safety. But adult relationships are not regulated by unspoken endurance. They're regulated by communicated limits. Calm doesn't have to disappear for that to happen. It just has to stop doing all the work alone. Calm people aren't meant to be endlessly accommodating. They're meant to be steady, not invisible. If you've been taken for granted, it doesn't mean you failed at being calm. It means your calm outgrew the environment it was in. And sometimes the most grounded thing you can do isn't to stay composed at all costs, but to let your presence take up the space it always deserved.